Hello, everyone. I want to also thank you for being here, choosing this event out of all the events out there. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Our presenters have a very interesting uh, content and a very informative and inspirational presentation. My name is Hasti Khodabakhsh, and I'm an architect, a project manager with Design Illustration Group, and also a member of the Committee on the Environment, or COTE, with AIALA. My focus is personally on topics around design and well-being, which is obviously intertwined with environmental justice. But we cover all sorts of topics on sustainability. COTE may be known mainly for our annual symposium, which happens once a year. It used to be called 2 degrees Celsius. This year it was 1.5 degree for obvious reasons, but that's not the only thing we do. We have other events throughout the year, such as this one, lecture series. Hopefully this year we're gonna have building tours again. So please make sure to check out our webpage on AIA website or sign up for our newsletter or follow us on our social media so you'll learn about our upcoming events. You're always looking for new members. If you're interested in this topic, we have monthly meetings you could attend. We are also always interested in having presenters and people who want to share their work, their projects. So I'll be sharing my email address in the chat box, but feel free to reach out to any of us, the committee chairs or any of the members if you want to get involved. And this event has been in the making for more than a year. Last year, unfortunately, had to be postponed because the wildfires and the subsequent blackouts affected one of our presenters. But I'm super excited that we got to, keep it going and have it happen this year. It's going to be a very, very interesting one. I have been following Kathleen's work for a while now, and through her, I got to learn about Communities for a Better Environment and meet Alicia and Julia, wonderful people, and they are gonna share their work with you. Alicia is a community organizer, a very accomplished one with Communities for a Better Environment, and Julia is a senior scientist. Interestingly, with a background in electrical engineering, but her specialty is working on prevention of, I believe, air pollution with refineries. And Kathleen is a senior sustainability engineer with Bureau Happel. They're going to start with introducing themselves. And then at the end, as Corinne mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A. I really hope you guys chime in and ask them questions. Yeah, from here, please, Kathleen, take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hasi, and thank you to the AIA COTE staff and just all the folks who've been involved in this for your leadership and allowing us to, put this together. Thank you again to Julia and Alicia for all of the work that you do. It's so inspiring. We're so lucky to have you speak to our industry, and thank you, everyone here, for making the time. I know it's already late in your day, but I really think this is going to be worth your while. So I'm just going to go through a quick slideshow to set the scene for y'all, to really, kind of connect all of the really moving presentation that Alicia and Julia have and really relate it back to our industry for some context. And then they're going to go through their work, what they're doing, and really give us a primer of what this means, environmental justice means for us in Los Angeles and in Wilmington and specifically. And then after that, I'm going to go through a quick couple more slides just to talk about how we as architects, engineers, designers, construction managers can take action on this really important topic, and then we'll dive into Q&A. So let me share my screen. Got it. Can you all see this? Okay. Yeah? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Got it. And I think, I met Alicia, met through email, I think right at the beginning of the pandemic. And she was so kind and eager to speak to us, and thought that this is really something that could be beneficial and all throughout the pandemic, and then the wildfires, the blackouts. It just shows, like, you know, when we talk about climate resiliency, it really does have effects. It really does have impacts. You know, the pandemic is related to our, you know, destruction of wild spaces all over the world, lead to more pandemics. And then we have this pollution issue, right? We've probably all been touched by pollution in some way. You know, we live in Los Angeles, one of the you know, worst places in the country for air quality. But, you know, like a lot of things with America, it's not something that affects us all equally, right? Pollution is a systemic problem. You know, it's not just a few bad apples. It is something that we need to take on together holistically and really figure out the root causes and drive them out. But luckily, you know, for us here today during this call, that's what we are all here to do. You know, we're problem solvers, whether we're engineers or architects or whatever, you know, our LinkedIn profile says, and we all can play a role in this. So I wanted to quickly start out with just a couple of definitions. I've gotten these terms confused sometimes, so I just think it's a really good way of grounding things. So I'm going to read some things out to you. I apologize, but it's just really good. I know you guys can read this, but the EPA's definition of environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, income, respect to the development, implementation, enforcement of environmental laws, regulation, and policies. This is really important. You know, and this is what the EPA says. The father of environmental justice, Dr. Robert Bullard, I think he puts it a lot more succinctly. You know, he says that America is segregated, and so is pollution. Race and class still matter and map closely with pollution, unequal protection, and vulnerability. Today's zip code is still the most potent predictor of individuals' health and well-being. Individuals who physically live on the wrong side of the tracks are subjected to elevated environmental health threats and more than their fair share of preventable diseases. Still, too many people and communities have the wrong complexion for protection. Reducing environmental health, economic, and racial disparities is a major priority of the environmental justice movement. I think that's a really powerful definition and just way of thinking about this presentation that you're going to hear from Alicia and Julia. And I think it's something that I hope that every one of us can take home to all of our work for the rest of our lives. So, you know, we got big things to do in this next hour and a half. But that's not to say that, you know, this isn't new information for most folks, right? The environmental justice movement is long ongoing. Some people consider that, you know, its birth started in 1982 in North Carolina. A transformer company was dumping PCBs, highly carcinogenic material, into a predominantly Black community. And that community rose up 500 people strong and led a nonviolent protest against the treatment and the unfair treatment of that community. But, you know, it's morphed and carried on to today. You know, you can consider the Grenfell Tower fire in London, an affordable housing community in a wealthy area of Kensington. You know, the contractor, the facades team skimped on, you know, the details to protect the facade during a fire. And that not only impacted the victims of that fire, but the entire area was covered with carcinogenic benzene, right? Or we can look to, you know, communities in Vietnam that are fighting the same multinational conglomerates that folks in Louisiana or the Gulf Coast are fighting. You know, they're fighting against polluting plastic companies, the same ones that, you know, manufacture our PVC pipes in our buildings, and they're fighting for their lives, right? They're fighting for their reproductive health, their children's health into the future, environmental degradation. These are all like elements of environmental justice that we should understand and be aware of, right? And halfway into the pandemic, I was lucky enough to be on a panel with a gentleman from Durban, South Africa, and we got to talking about the similarities of Los Angeles and Durban, and not only about the architecture, but the fact that, you know, both communities are contending with oil refineries so close to homes. You know, South Africa, you know, apartheid, famously, you know, from the apartheid, in Los Angeles to this day. This is a photo from the Toxic Tour I went on, where I heard youth speakers from Alicia and Julia's organization, this is a reality for people. This isn't something that WELL certification is addressing, LEED certification, even Living Building Challenge, whatever you want to call it. Our industry, even though we deal with the bread and butter of the built environment, we're not really paying enough attention to this. And you can say, oh, maybe that's all well and good if you're an environmental advocate or you work in nonprofits or, you make a lot of donations, but how does this connect to my day-to-day? And this is my personal story as a mechanical engineer. I work at Burrell Happold. I'm a senior engineer there, and I got my start at, working in Revit, designing ductwork, making sure that we could deliver, energy efficient building systems. And I got to work on a project that wanted to remove red list chemicals from that particular project. And, when you think about a duct system, you think it's pretty simple, right? But actually there's a lot involved, right? There's the different adhesives, there's duct wrap, to increase efficiency. There's different types of mastics to join the steel together. And if you really look closely at that, there's a lot of different hazardous toxic chemicals associated. Those different mastics, they have small amounts of formaldehyde in them, chlorinated paraffins, toluene, benzene, acetone. Like the smell when you use nail polish remover. These are all hazardous chemicals identified by including the Trump EPA administration as carcinogenic chemicals that can mess with our endocrine systems. They lead to asthma, all sorts of human problems. And we're putting this into our buildings without even really considering the impacts. And maybe, we can say that these are just small amounts of chemicals. They're really, the government says it's safe for me. It's not my responsibility. I hear it all the time. But, if we multiply that out by how much ductwork we designed for that building, for that particular building, a Living Building Challenge project, if we hadn't designed it out of our specifications, would have been 5,000 linear feet of ductwork. For a company that I work, a global engineering company, how many buildings do we design per year? You can see that this really adds up. And our industry is part of the problem, right? We didn't create this problem. We didn't invent the chemicals. A lot of them were derived during, the chemical warfare during World War I and World War II. And then with new technology, we're able to add new flame retardants. You've probably heard during COVID-19, different types of nanoparticles that have been kind of implemented into our materials, but a lot of industrial materials, chemicals, adhesives, paints that are based off of the petrochemical economy. And this leads to an awful amount of hazardous chemical pollution. And our building industry plays an outside role in that, right? How could we not, if that's what our ductwork looks like? And that's to say that, it's not just MEP engineers on the hook, it's also a structural issue. Anytime you hear the word embodied carbon, it's really important that we get those numbers down, that we meet our carbon emissions goals, but someone is living next to those cement facilities. Someone is living next to where the steel foundries occur, the recycling plants where the steel gets recycled. There's health impacts, public health impacts to every decision that we make, every choice we make. And we really need to start holding ourselves accountable, right? And of course, this includes architects as well. These are just general details that I see all over on my projects when I'm checking for energy efficiency. But I can tell you, polystyrene, that is a very hazardous chemical. You need styrene to make it, which is a hazardous carcinogen that plagues many communities, different halogenated flame retardants in our wall materials. All of these are not only hazards to the building users, but they have to be made by somewhere. They have to be made somewhere and they have to be made by someone. So we really need to think about the human stories behind our choices and the impacts that they are having, right? We can't let our industry off the hook for this. And these are just, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia and Julia, but these were just some of the snapshots that I took when I went on a toxic tour of the community that they're going to talk to you about. I'm pretty sure that their organization and others like them are still doing virtual toxic tours if you're interested. But you can start to see the sustainability, health, and equity issues that we're facing as an industry, right? When we think about the far distances that we need to get our supply chains to our projects, or the natural gas, or the diesel to get our construction going, some of that could even be coming from the oil and gas wells right next to people's homes. the port and freight pollution, you know, port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, one of the busiest ports in the whole world, right? That's an enormous amount of emissions and pollution that's affecting communities when we ship in glass, you know, from Europe, or plastics from China. And, you know, something that was really startling to me, that in Wilmington, in Los Angeles, some of the big insulation manufacturers that I rely on for our energy efficient buildings, their plants are right next to the refineries. That's not an accident. They rely on this hazardous petrochemical supply chain that we really need to be thinking about. I'm not going to tell you which manufacturing plant it is. You can look it up yourself, but it's right there alongside all these smokestacks, right? And for so long, you know, think about it. Like, why hasn't our industry fully embraced folks like Alicia and Julia? Why haven't we lifted up our climate youth leaders who are shutting down power plants? We really need to be thinking about this and make this something that isn't just a once in a year thing. And so I hope that that's a big thing that we can take home from this. And I just want to leave you to say that, you know, for so long, when we talk about health and wellness, when we talk about sustainability, different certification systems, we've only focused on the building end users. When we say designing healthy buildings, there's a big issue there. You know, we want to have buildings that are safe and healthy, and people can be productive and live great lives and do great work and learn. That's really important. We got to reduce, you know, indoor VOCs. But that's only part of the equation. We need to think of the communities that are typically considered externalities. They're not. They are stakeholders too. And, you know, huge amounts of the United States population lives within 1 mile of a polluting facility. You know, we need to think about our workers, our essential workers that, you know, we relied on during the pandemic. What about their health? You know, what about the materials that they're exposed to day after day after day? And, you know, something very personal for me, my brother's a firefighter in the San Antonio Fire Department. You know, when we make these decisions about our materials, what happens at the end of, you know, if, you know, God forbid a fire does occur in California, it's happening more and more, right? You know, if we put polyurethane in our buildings, what happens when that light's on fire? What happens to that firefighter's health? You know, that person's a real person. That person is my brother. So, you know, everybody probably has a story that they're connected to. An uncle who died of cancer after being, you know, working on a factory floor. Someone who grew up in, you know, a part of town that was exposed to a lot of different, you know, chemical emissions. You know, I'm sure every one of you can think of someone who's impacted by our supply chain and our building decisions. So, you know, I'm going to turn it over to Julia and Alicia. But I just want you guys to think, you know, you're probably all, you know, you're all sustainability advocates. You probably know lots about LEED certification, WELL certification, all of those. And think about who we're designing for, right? We're so often designing for, you know, the building end user, and how can we protect their health, and holding ourselves up to these really great standards about air quality. And how can we think about the bigger picture? How can we think about communities, and how can we think about the great work that Alicia and Julia are going to show you guys? So that's me. I'm going to turn it over to them. And I think let's stop sharing now. Hopefully that sets the stage.
Julia, you're muted.
Okay, let's see if I can start sharing now. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Can you see our slides? Let me get back to the beginning.
Here we go. That's great. Well, thank you, Kathleen and Hasti and Corinne and Jessica for making this possible, especially to Kathleen, who after attending a toxic tour, which is something that we do to create awareness, follow with action, you know, to make other people aware of what impacted her by going to this community that I will be describing today, which is a sacrifice zone. That has to pay for the is part of the externalities that she mentioned, creating where all these fossil fuel products are created, leaving this community with the brunt of the pollution impact in their health and in the environment. Again, my name is Alicia Rivera. I am with CBE, Communities for a Better Environment. It's established in 1978. I'm a community organizer in the city of Wilmington, here in Southern California, what is known as the port area of Los Angeles. And you see my coworker, Julia May, CBE senior scientist, who will be also sharing this presentation with me. Communities for a Better Environment, better known as CBE, has been organizing and empowering in California communities of color for over 40 years. Our ultimate aim is to phase out fossil fuels and toxic through a just transition and equitable economy that build healthy communities. CBE has offices in Southern California, in Wilmington and Southeast Los Angeles, known for Huntington Park, Southgate, that is mostly industrial pollution. And we also have offices in Richmond and East Oakland. We empower or the people that we work with on the impacted communities through leadership training, through organizing, and that's where Julia comes to play with providing legal and scientific assistance.
And as we've heard a bit from Kathleen, our communities endure environmental racism. You're seeing some mapping of the places where CBE organizes by Cal EnviroScreen. It's an interesting tool. You can Google it and put in a zip code, and it gives you demographic information about, asthma rates, income levels, racial demographics, smog levels, and it shows you that the communities in the red zones with the highest environmental and socioeconomic impacts are communities of color. Study after study has found major racial disparities in environmental risk, not just income disparities. And unfortunately, permitting for polluter expansions continues to perpetuate these problems. So in Richmond, the Chevron refinery, you see the 2012 explosion that came very close to killing 19 workers. There are many different kinds of hazards continuing from that site. In East Oakland, another place where we organize, it doesn't have refineries, but it has the major diesel trucking impacts and other impacts. Both of the communities that have the highest impacts are largely Black communities and Latinx communities and in general communities of color. In Southeast LA, major mobile and stationary pollution sources and smog. But today we're gonna focus on Wilmington. Those are the 4 communities where we mainly work.
And give you a close-up of where Wilmington is in this, at the tip of the city of Los Angeles. See it here in this map, right down here, the port area. And Wilmington has a lot of different sources of pollution. It has the largest oil refinery complex on the West Coast. There is also oil drilling, and there is extreme diesel traffic coming from the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach activities. This is a closer look up of the massive Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Is a source of pollution due to the extreme diesel trucking and ship emission happening every minute. And Wilmington is also right next to a city of Carson. And so together we call it the Wilmington-Carson area. They both have about a third of this entire state refining capacity surrounding the houses. Here you see the names of the 5 refineries that are in Wilmington and in its border with Carson. And it's 5 of them. And there is even one more just a few miles away in the city of Torrance. Used to be the former ExxonMobil, now is changed name to Torrance Refinery. Imagine having all these refineries close to you. And so when children attend school, they can escape the pollution of whatever incident might be happening to a nearby refinery. Here is a picture of the children at Hawaiian Elementary School, and the smoke is coming from Phillips 66, which is not even a long block away from this school and from a daycare center and a senior center and low-income housing that is all in this area here. And so, you know, when something is happening that they have to flare up and there's black smoke, the air is so bad that children at school, they keep them indoor. And, you know, children look forward to come out and play. So that's very discouraging for them when something is happening.
And this shows you a graphic representation that the South Coast Air District did. It's the annual average concentrations of oil refinery emissions. You can see up in the north, you've got Chevron and Exxon Mobil, which is now PBF. Even for one refinery, there's a big plume, but in Wilmington with the Star, you've got 5 refineries, air pollution all on top of each other. It's a cumulative impact. This is the largest concentration of oil refining on the West Coast. So you can see that it's an inherent part of the region's and the state's fossil fuel infrastructure. And in Wilmington, cars and trucks are not always the biggest pollution source, even though you have the extreme diesel trucking from the ports. Refinery VOCs, particulate matter, fine particulate matter, and NOx, nitrogen oxides, are even bigger. This is what it looks like on a good day. People are right up against the refinery. The emissions are invisible, but they're large and continuous. And this is a bit of the complex, of the massive refinery complex. It's not even all of it. There are boilers and heaters, cracking units, storage tanks, flares, thousands of valves. These are constant emission sources, and they have episodic accidents. And they release many different kinds of pollutants.
And here is 2 photographs of when you can really see the pollution. When there is refinery explosions, they have flaring, black smoke. This one is at ConocoPhillips, now Phillips 66. And due to a power outage, because they are connected to the city grid. So anytime there is a power outage in the city, they're gonna have to shut down and flare up. This one here on the right, it's workers cleaning up after an abandoned pipeline that had been decommissioned for over 20 years, suddenly started oozing oil after a very small tumbler of the earth. And this is up against the homes. This is on one of the streets. They had to break the pavement, a lot of noise with machines, the houses right there. And then they had to clean it up. It took about 2 weeks where the whole street was shut down, a cordon off. even difficult for the residents to get out to work. So this is in addition to all the pollution.
And here are 4 other examples of when it gets very visible. This is one oil refinery, Tesoro 2001, 2009 coker fire, 2010 Tesoro power outage, 2016 Tesoro sulfur tank explosion. I'm just showing you one refinery. You could do this with any of the refineries and you would have regular explosions and fires. And this is 2020 when it gets really scary. I'm gonna try now to show you a video of this event. Let's see if I can make this work. Hold on. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this was a major explosion and fireball that could be seen 20 miles away. They have to do major flaring during events like this because while you're shutting down the refinery, you have all these gases that are no longer being processed and they have to be burned off so they're not directly dumped to the air. You may also be able to see the big black clouds of smoke. These are poorly quantified what is coming off of this facility during an event like this, but we definitely know there's tons of sulfur oxides and VOCs and particulate matter. And the firefighters had to work valiantly to make sure this doesn't turn into a runaway fire. They shut down 2 major freeways during this event. So let's see if I can get back to the slides. Screen share. Can you see the slides now again?
Yes.
Good. So these events, despite repeated breakdown events and findings that the emissions were underreported by extensive air monitoring, Tesoro was still allowed to do major expansion by the air district. And after this decision, people from all over LA joined with CBE and our local EJ environmental justice organizations and marched on Earth Day in 2017 to Tesoro's gates. It was an unprecedented march, but unfortunately it did not change their minds. They still got their permits for expansion. Other refineries also present hazards like these. Those were just some Tesoro examples.
And this is other hazards in addition to the chemicals that are spewed out, the whole day. And this one is a special danger used at only 2 refineries in the state, one of which is in Wilmington, the Valero refinery, and the other one is in Torrance, the former ExxonMobil that we've been mentioning. These 2 use an additive that increases the octane in gasoline. It's called hydrogen fluoride. The M is supposedly because they have modified it, so it's not so pure, but it's one of the world's most dangerous chemicals. And tests found that upon release, it forms a low cloud that is lethal at breathing height for miles. And even the LA County found that millions in Los Angeles are at risk of death or serious injury upon a release. And recently we were involved in effort to try to have the regulators ban the use of MHF at these 2 refineries because there is already an alternative that most of the other refineries already use. However, the oil industry, which highly influence all regulators, kill the regulation that would have banned the MHF.
This is an example of a hazard that doesn't just impact the frontline communities. Of course, they're at the highest risk, but even the County of LA found that 1 million people are at risk if a major release occurred at either of these refineries within these zones. This is usually using standard EPA risk assessment guidelines, which found that 16 to 17 miles out, a release could cause serious, irreversible health impacts. In the first 8 to 9 miles, death can occur. And these risks are ongoing. It wasn't just us that was trying to get a ban of the chemical. The South Coast Air District staff proposed it, but the industry, the oil industry, was able to kill that regulation through the board of the Air District. And so these risks continue, but we have won many major improvements on refinery emissions.
And here are some of the things we have been able to win throughout the years that requiring something called best available control technology on different equipment through the South Coast and through the Bay Area Air District and through also the State Air Resources Board and the EPA and other. Some of those successes in regulation to cut dozens of tons of air pollution per day are, for example, the flare minimization, which require refineries to use flaring only at the minimum and only during emergencies. And they have to recover vapors and accident prevention. That we still are working to tighten those regulations even further because refineries continue to get away with using too much flaring. We also have one pressure relief device, vapor capture, storage tank leak standards and vapor recovery, valve and flanges, leak tight standards. You would not believe that, you know, those connections from the valves can, if they are not really tight, they can put out vapors into the air. And of course, there is marine loading with vapor recovery. You see the large tankers on dock, you know, loading and offloading fossil fuel. And through all this, you know, we have improved things, but they is still bad. Refineries will pollute forever. Wilmington also has lots of oil drilling up against the houses. Look at this oil pump. It literally is on top of people's roofs. Here is a map. Wilmington is one of the largest urban oil fields in the nation. And we say our logo is no drilling, where we live, where we sleep, where we play, where we pray. And here is an example of another photograph. This girl from Banning High School playing, surrounded by all this oil extraction. On the other side of this, of the street that we cannot see is the Boys and Girls Club. They have the same scene. And of course, what's coming out of all this oil drilling, one of the most dangerous toxic is called hydrogen sulfide gas, which is toxic to humans even at low concentration.
One example of a real concentrated oil drilling, when ExxonMobil had a site in Wilmington that had gone to almost no drilling. It was bought up by Warren Oil, and they decided to put in hundreds of wells with very little environmental review. Neighbors called us up after this happened, said it was a living hell. Coughing, trouble sleeping, weird taste in your mouth, house is full of dust, 24/7 operations, high blood pressure due to the stress, black film on cars, headaches and nausea, breathing problems. The nausea is is associated with exposure to hydrogen sulfide. So it's a good indicator of those emissions.
When we found out that the city of Los Angeles was simply rubber stamping permit for expansion and for oil drilling, we sued the city and we won new necessary environmental review of drilling that was missing in the permitting. We did that on behalf of our youth. The city compromised to fix the issue. And what happened is that the oil industry sued our youth and the city. And they wanted us to pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars for their legal costs. But in the end, we prevailed. And now we are part of what's called STAND LA, which is stand for Standing Together Against Neighborhood Drilling. And our campaign is very close to winning a phase out of oil drilling in the city of Los Angeles. And statewide, we're also pushing for the governor to approve statewide setbacks that protect communities like in Kern County, that is another producer of fossil fuels, and there's a lot of fracking there. Wilmington has beautiful things as well. This is the former mansion of the one who founded Wilmington. His name was Phineas Bannon. That's why we have Bannon High School. So this is a museum. It's really beautiful. Used to be his residence. And very close is the Senior Citizen Center, where a lot of the meetings by the regulators and community meetings happen to inform and strategize. And of course, we also have our office in Wilmington, or field office. And we are a center of activity for youth and adults, where we gather, we interpret, we analyze, and we plan our activities together with youth and adults.
So we know the problem. Fossil fuels are causing smog and toxics locally, and basically destroying the planet with climate catastrophe in front of us. We've got wildfires and floods and droughts, hurricanes, ice melting. But we actually have the solutions. One obvious one is to stop expanding. They're still expanding in environmental justice communities, are still facing expansions. But we know that the technology exists for replacement and phase out. UC Berkeley studies were among the first that showed you can phase out fossil fuels economically using existing technology, including energy efficiency, replacing natural gas with zero emission renewables, electrifying transportation. And but our communities also want equitable clean energy access, especially in refinery towns, including distributed solar, economic electric vehicles and transit, charging stations, building decarb, and more, as well as community resiliency, gardens, green space, food security, healthy communities, and equitable community-based solutions. I just want to repeat the 3 steps from the UC Berkeley 2012 study. They found it was like a 2% at the most GDP cost to phase out 80% of greenhouse gases by 2050 through energy efficiency, replacing natural gas with clean renewables, and electrifying transportation. But transportation decarb is far behind electricity decarb. Most greenhouse gases and smog come from the fuel chain of extraction, refining, and transportation. We are making progress on these through a program called Charge Ahead at the state level to provide equitable vehicle electrification, and through the Zero Emission Vehicle Program. But battery EVs are only a couple % of California's vehicles, while the grid is far ahead of that, with around a third clean renewable energy and headed toward 100% clean. So we have a very long way to go to get to where we need to go in zero emission vehicles, to get rid of the refineries in transportation emissions and extraction. The oil industry fights this tooth and nail because they have to basically be dismantled. Electric utilities can still exist, but the oil industry needs to be replaced.
In addition, you wonder what can architects and engineers do? We have been thinking about, what to suggest. We know people are thinking about solar efficiency and zero carbon buildings without gas. We know you care about communities, and also think about policies and financing dedicated to electric vehicle charging access, especially in low-income communities like Wilmington, where up to very recently, we didn't even have one charging station. Solar access in low-income communities, fixing roofs. A lot of people would like to have solar, but their roof do not withstand the weight and they cannot afford to fix the roof. Solar for all includes both low-income homeowners and shared solar in low-income housing, as most people in LA are renters. We also need good land use policies, community input on redeveloping brownfields, close polluting facilities to put parks, housing, clean energy. That's what we hope to do once we phase out all these oil drilling sites in Wilmington and throughout the city of LA, and building the car policies. Environmental justice means equal access for communities of color and low-income communities to a clean environment. And in addition to our work on fossil fuel, we are also involved in work such as working with the Public Utility Commission and our local electricity provider, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, in planning and in legislation so that they can offer solar, energy storage, and other zero emission grid and equitable energy access. We also pushing for fair housing access and also promoting climate resiliency, including cooling centers in Wilmington, supporting Black Lives Matter and racial justice. And we also, throughout the pandemic, we started an emergency COVID fund for low-income community members in Wilmington. We're also working to have green spaces, promoting gardens and more. And through our civic engagement, we push to support and promote candidates that are going to share and speak and support our issues. And of course, this is how we get the community involved in policy and calling elected officials in elections and all that. So we come to the end of our presentations. We would like to know what ideas and comments come to mind after seeing our slides. In your profession, what ideas do you think can be worked or applied differently to achieve environmental justice and green energy? If you would like to get involved with us, contact us. Here is our website. You can always help us when we're contacting officials, to push legislation and other policy work by joining our mailing list. And if nothing else, you can always donate. These fossil fuel companies have deep pockets and they want to break us. That's how they take care of the opposition. They break you. They have created a company town in Wilmington, or elected official, the councilman is totally influenced, has never voted to support any of our issues. And they buy, you know, by donating, even the churches, even the Boys and Girls Club, they wouldn't even let me pass flyers because they are afraid to lose the funding they get from all these refineries. So donating to the work we do is important, because if we as you might know, we always have funding issues, and sometimes our funders don't fund us to work on fossil fuel issues. They fund us for green projects, for brown fields, but we manage somehow from the general funding to do the work that we need to do to phase out fossil fuels. So we would like to hear any questions you might have, and appreciate your attention and your interest in showing up today to hear what we have to say. And of course, again, I want to thank Kathleen. And, you know, she is the reason why we're doing this. And I hope that some of you get encouraged to also promote what's happening. You know, why do we present this sacrifice community to you? You're gonna say, what can I do? You think about what we drive, you know, what we eat, how we waste food and everything, because we take it for granted. But there are communities that are externalities, such as Wilmington. They have to sacrifice their health in order for it to be a production of gasoline, of jet fuel, of diesel, of everything for the whole state and for everybody else. And of course, what happens in Wilmington doesn't stay right there. It ends up affecting the planet. So we're here, and thank you, Hasti as well, and Corinne and Jessica for making possible for us to have this presentation. We really appreciate it.
And thank you so much, Alicia and Julia. I mean, I've heard you guys give that presentation a couple of times, and it moves me every time. And I think it's one of those things where once you know this information, you can't unknow it. And I do think it really creates a change. It's created a huge change in the way that I, you know, spend my working life, and it's changed a lot beyond my life. So and I know that you know, it can always be kind of like just warm us up. I've got five items that like has made me think about, you know, how can we take a bit more action, you know, with reference to what Julia and Alicia have been saying. So the first one is really thinking, you know, they showed a lot of slides about the oil and gas impacts, the refineries, and we need to make the connection about extraction, right? We need to think about the transportation of our materials. We need to think about the natural gas that for our heating and for our energy. We need to think about the diesel powering the excavation equipment when we're building below grade parking. We need to think about how, you know, that oil and gas gets refined into different petrochemicals that goes into our carpets and goes into our wall assemblies and our, you know, our duct insulation. All of these elements that makes up buildings, they start in a place like Wilmington, right? So we really need to think about the whole life cycle. We need to think about, you know, why we continue to fail to meet the circular economy. It ends up in a landfill near some community, right? We need to think about the construction workers that are exposed to health hazards. We need to think about all these different health and environmental topics. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. Second is that there's really great paper that Will Wright from the AIA shared with me and Hasti. It's from a professor up in the Midwest. And it's really worth your time to read. I can share it in the chat, but it shows that, you know, when you talk about this to your clients or to, you know, the people that you work with, your family, your community, and people might say, oh, you can explain environmental justice impacts just because it's income, but it's not. This is environmental racism issue. This very complicated graph shows that, across, Black, the Latinx community, Asian Americans are exposed, up to 87% higher exposure than white communities in terms of toxicity and particulate matter. And that's coming from, just like Alicia and Julie were saying, it's a cumulative impact. It's construction. Our construction emissions are harming communities. Our supply chains, that industrial, piece of it, that's harming communities. Designing too much parking in our stupid buildings, that hurts communities. Diesel equipment, all of the great work that folks are doing to get to decarbonize our buildings and stop using natural gas in commercial cooking and residential cooking and heating. All of this is a health issue, right? So we really need to be thinking about these issues, not just in climate change, but also in public health. If you're interested in learning more about how we can, improve our supply chains, we need to be, cleaning up our specs. We need to be asking for HPDs, if we can protect the health of our building end users, if we center frontline communities first, it'll have ripple effects, right? We should be designing with materials that don't have toxic chemicals. We should be trying to use materials that don't rely on the petrochemical infrastructure, right? We should be using natural materials that don't pollute our communities and don't end up with more oil pumps in the ground, right? And every time, I know there's some folks on here who are really passionate about embodied carbon as well. Please, anytime you hear the word embodied carbon, you hear that phrase, you go to a conference, keep in the back of your mind that embodied carbon is related to toxic pollution too. Think about that. When we think about, high carbon insulation choices, it's also likely to have formaldehyde associated with it. And we can be damn sure that it's associated with petrochemicals. So think about that. Every time you see that in someone's LinkedIn page or you see it in a conference, think about communities like Wilmington, and really hopefully that will galvanize us. And again, donate to CVE. I mean, they're doing such amazing work. They're doing work that, our industry needs to be doing. But, if you can't donate your money, think about the way that, you can change your projects to join in this fight. We should be asking ourselves why we're not doing more projects in Wilmington, why we're not supporting communities like Wilmington. We have very powerful voices. We present to, the mayor, city planners, government officials. We can use our voice to support communities that, like they were saying, typically get left out, and, the work that they have to do to overcome, such great odds. We need to lend our voice. We need to lend our vote. If you're thinking about summer internships or getting students involved, we need to think about how we can get students in Wilmington and other fence line communities into this industry. We don't have a very diverse industry, and this is why this issue has been dormant for so long, because we don't have people from communities, expressing what their lived experiences are. So it's another way that we can think about that. But really donate your money. We got to do it. So those are just my ideas, to start us off, but I'll turn it over to everyone else. And thanks.
Well, thank you so much to all three presenters. It was, again, it's not the first time I also saw this content, but I was, again, moved and really impressed. Thank you for all the work you're doing at Communities for a Better Environment on our behalf, and your achievements improves our quality of life every time you manage to ban a chemical or set a new regulations. I think all of us are impacted. I hope we can also be good allies and help out, not only as individuals, but I guess all of us can reach out to our the firms we work for and have them donate or help out in any way they can, be partners. You mentioned that you're part of Stand LA. I wonder if you do collaborations or you team up with other organizations that every now and then on different topics, if you can mention that, and mention how, you know, an organization can get involved and help out with your initiatives, that would be great.
Definitely, Stand-LA is a coalition, and CVE is one of the members. Esperanza Community Housing is another. SCOPE, Strategic Concept on Organizing, another local organization. Black Women's for Wellness is the other ones, and Redeemer. So, and also we are very close with Tierra Club, with NRDC, Natural Resource Defense Council, CEJA, which is the California Environmental Justice Alliance. You know, this is how we push together to get things at statewide. We can't do it alone. And so, you know, we come for one another. That's how we're gonna win a real Green New Deal nationally. You know, we push on our governor through something called the Last Chance Alliance to ban fracking and to set up protected setback. In Kern County, in the Central Valley, is the same as in Wilmington. The workers that are picking our vegetables and fruit are up against all this oil drilling and fracking that is going on. So definitely we work on coalition building, yes.
I would add that right now the state greenhouse gas scoping plan is up again this year to be adopted next year. So far, mostly they don't do anything about oil refinery greenhouse gases. They allow pollution trading instead through the cap and trade program. And that unfortunately allows expansion of refineries all over the state. And so that process needs to get serious, not only to help out frontline communities of phase out oil refining, but seriously for planetary survival. We're running out of time. It's the same solution for local frontline communities that have to deal with smog and toxics and climate change. Same solution for the planet. And so the state of California is doing its scoping plan. It's another, there are many policy venues that we're involved in.
Great information. I really would like our audience to get involved. I don't know if anybody has any questions, would like to talk, make a comment. I see that our current chair is on, and maybe even our next year's chair. If you guys want to chime in, please feel free. Otherwise, I keep asking questions myself.
Thanks, Hasti, for organizing along with our speakers. Thank you very much. This was great. It's amazing how much damage it's kind of hidden, and it's all these plumes. I actually grew up, I went to high school in Long Beach, and I went to you know, college, and I've lived a long time there, and to witness that, you know, there is danger in the air and how it is affected. And when it's concentrated in Wilmington, the nickname that we had for Wilmington, right, it's Smellington. So my apologies for the offense, but it's everybody has the notion, and the sad part is that people think that's okay, right? And that's the way that things have to happen. And, you know, to a certain extent, we shouldn't let that happen. So I appreciate all the knowledge that has been shared today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ismar. By the way, that was our chair, Ismar. I want to ask another question. Kathleen, I mean, it was, I think, mainly through your work that I started to pay attention, not to all the other people and communities that are affected by building materials outside of the building, end users and occupants. And for me personally, like first, thing that was coming to my mind was the environmental impacts of a material. But then when you want to factor in all the health impacts, I thought the rule of thumb that you brought up, like the more embodied carbon, the unhealthier it is when it comes to the production of the material. But is it also the same when it comes to building occupants? Is that a good rule of thumb to just say, okay, if a material is more sustainable or has a lower footprint, it's a healthier one? Or are there other things we should consider? Are there any conflicts? Sometimes a healthier material may be not as good for the environment, or other way around.
Yeah, it's a good question, Hafsa. You got me. I mean, I think I used the last slide to say, like, putting fence line communities at the center of everything we do. It's very similar to like a social justice kind of mantra of like centering Black women in, you know, every movement that we can, because and I'm paraphrasing a lot of this from the Healthy Building Network and all the amazing folks there. But, you know, if we can think about the communities that are impacted so heavily, like Wilmington or Richmond or places in the Gulf Coast, or if you guys have read about, I mean, there's so many examples. Like, you can, if you've read about what's happening in Chicago with the metal recycling facility getting moved from a more affluent community to a low-income community, predominantly of color. If you've read about like what's happened with coal mining in Appalachia, or you know, even if you started watching that like Mayor of Easttown documentary or show on HBO, like, if we can protect those communities first and we can protect their health, it will ripple to our occupants. It will ripple to manufacturing workers. I don't really know a lot of examples of, you know, starting out with a, you know, something like cork or, you know, sheep's wool, and, you know, it picking up toxic elements along the way. You know, it really needs to start at this point of extraction, and we need to double down on, you know, as architects and engineers, we need to be asking questions from the second we get a brief to say, you know, can we look at a different type of material? You know, do we have to have so much parking that's going to cause freeway pollution? I just think that we need to start asking these questions and centering them around environmental justice, because we'll be meeting our climate goals even faster if we focus on health. And yeah, I guess I'm kind of dodging the question. And if anyone else knows,
no,
please.
this was all very, very helpful. I mean, the first step is to have the awareness and pay attention to, and be aware of all the impacts. I know that you're going to be speaking in an upcoming event, a series on healthy materials. Do you want to mention that for the audience in case they want to tune in?
Yeah, and I'll share the link, and hopefully we can get Alicia and Julia to speak at that for a national audience. But we're trying to do another series of these talks, you know, for a wider group focused on like structural elements, enclosure, interiors, MEP, materials of tomorrow, so that you can get even more knowledge on this. And I'll drop that in the chat for you.
Yeah, you know, I know that I have checked a lot of videos that I use for my members meeting every week, so I can present issues to them to build consciousness. And I know that a lot of, you know, they're killing the rainforest and just to get the wood. We don't know, you know, where all that material is coming from. You know, kicking people out of their habitat in order to get the wood. You know what's happening in Brazil, that they are really burning on purpose all you know, the jungle, so that they can get into it through the, you know, for cattle raising and for the wood. You know, it really is so important to support legislation. I know that here in the city of Torrance, they require any building material, you know, that is left out or whatever is, they have to recycle it. I mean, that's very important because how much wood is put into buildings that are demolished to just make them brand new? Where is all that stuff goes? is so important when there are requirements, you know, through legislation. You know, for example, right here, we are having now to put a different color of roofing so that it doesn't, it kind of reflects the sunlight, you know, to try to keep cooling a little bit on the building. All those kinds of things, I'm sure you guys already know. But like you say, it's thinking about, you know, where all this stuff come from, that we just go to Home Depot, and of course you guys don't even go there. It's probably already there for you guys, and you're not the ones who build it. But all those, you know, I think it takes courage to get things started and promoted, and you know, and really pass the word out and start. You know, people are gonna think, oh, you know, they just too much trouble. You know, why would I do that? You know, I'm gonna get criticized, laughed at, and maybe my job or whatever, they're gonna start to isolate me for having all these crazy ideas. But somebody has to do it. We're not just architects. We are citizens of this world, ultimately. And so, you know, so that's what I appeal. That's what I appeal to people, because, you know, I'm in this, you know, so anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you so much for sharing. Again, I ask if anybody wants to have a word or ask a question. I would like to hear a little about Julia's experience. Sorry, yeah, so I know that you came from an engineering background. I don't know if you want to share your experience, the transition, and how that mindset has helped you do what you do now so successfully.
Oh, sure. I started out in Silicon Valley as an electrical engineer. And, you know, it was an interesting puzzle to me, but it wasn't really that organically interesting. And I left and started to get into looking at appropriate technology issues. And then eventually I found CBE that is very unusual in that we have scientists and public interest lawyers working with community organizers. It's kind of an unusual combination. So I found I was able to use my engineering background and worked over a period of 35 years into oil refinery air pollution prevention, as well as I do also do electricity planning and renewable energy. And it's interesting how these are all coming together, because we need to electrify almost everything to get rid of fossil fuels. So I found that as an engineer, I can argue myself blue in the face using technical arguments to regulators, and they don't care unless you have people power. So I am very happy and honored to be able to work with people like Alicia, who are so deeply connected and dedicated to the community, that I can use my engineering background to evaluate technical issues, to demystify refineries, to identify pollution prevention issues, and then to have that turned into action. So, you know, sometimes we get really tired because we're fighting, you know, a big beast. But we also have many successes, and it's great to have a combination. It's great to talk to all you folks who are actually interested in knowing about this.
Thank you for sharing your experience.
Miranda just put a comment that tomorrow she's going to be talking to her internal sustainability champions. Wonderful. Please, you know, pass this information. And if we can be of any help, let us know. Yes, we'll show our face and say something if it helps.
I think you guys present at every client meeting. Sorry, Miranda, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I unfortunately have to jump off right now, but you know, I used to work on a site in a facility near a lignite plant in Greece for 2 summers, and if the wind blew the right way, it was covered in ash and we were breathing it in. And if you haven't experienced it, it's hard for some people to conceptualize. And I think the visuals that you all showed today, you know, drive that point home, seeing the young girls playing soccer and, you know, there's the facilities right behind them, seeing the children at school and there's fire and smoke. You know, these are the screenshots that I took today that I think not only am I going to show the champions tomorrow, but our office meeting that we have on Monday, and how, you know, why we, you know, those of us who are on this call especially push these issues for our designers. It is not just we're trying to be a pain in your ass about getting your LEED certification or your WELL certification or meeting a code requirement, but it is because there are lives impacted daily by these decisions that we make, and that we have to be better about it. And when you're not, and recently I heard someone say this, when you are not making these decisions and when you are not supporting them, you are you're in climate denial. You know, you are in denial about environmental justice. You are in denial about the racist decisions that you are making by not selecting, by not participating in the discussion that we had today, and being better about what we can do as architects and designers going forward. So this was just wonderful, and more people need to see this and more people need to be involved with this. So I'm hoping that, you know, this is just more of a that we have more people on board today, and that it, you know, it just continues to grow in terms of what we can do. So thank you again for sharing with us tonight.
You know, thank you for that, Miranda. I heard children and youth saying that they thought that this was just normal, having refineries and having all this flaring and all this explosion. They thought that this was normal. And so when they go to other communities and they immediately feel, you know, they don't feel that they even fit in. They start to realize that it's only where they live that is like that. Because, you know, just on top of the hill, 1 mile away is the very wealthy Palos Verdes area, Palos Verdes State and Palos Verdes, you know, multi-million-dollar houses there. And Wilmington is just like down there, like the dumping ground. A lot of these people up there in Palos Verdes have businesses, dismantling cars and, you know, shares in the refineries right down there. And they, you know, why do we have to, I mean, there's got to be people that are poor. We can't help it. But if we can, I think, you know, it would be good to do it, because, you know, I see people and I visit young mothers, you know, that have tumors. And at one time, a reporter said, you saw the picture that Julia presented of the refinery up against the houses. And one reporter asked me, I wonder why would anybody live here? And I said, well, let's go ask. And we went to the closest to the fence, the house closest to the fence, and we knocked on the door. And the woman said, I was desperate to find a house with 3 kids. And this is the only place where I could find one. Did you think about the refinery? Yes, I saw, but you know, one thing is that you keep hoping that you would never get cancer. So they keep hoping the same thing. And the other thing is that they are unaware of how that might affect your health. And then they say that 3 years into living there, immediately they start to see how their children are having asthma and wheezing, and all these changes. And you know, I can't help it now that housing is so expensive to think, would I live here if I had you know, if I was living on the street? And I can't say no anymore. I used to be able to say I wouldn't live here, but now I wouldn't.
You know,
because there is just so much people who can't afford a house and a roof over their head.
And a house is actually a luxury. You know, you might have people in a 1-bedroom sharing it with a lot of family members and in the house. it's a sad reality. I really appreciate all the, how can architects, engineers do and be involved. And, my thing, what I've been sort of considering, because I like to kind of not use let's look at it under this lens, because I feel like you're looking at things through a microscope and, you shouldn't be looking at a petri dish. You should be part of the community. And I think if we can go a step further and diversify our practices and get a lot of different perspectives, from different levels and different, backgrounds, then we can actually own the issues and act on it better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Somebody in the chat asked about the slides being shared. I know that the presentation was recorded and hopefully all the participants will get a link to it. I'm not sure about the slides. We'll follow up on that. But I also believe that these slides are extremely helpful. I think in every single presentation to the clients, they should be included. And it would be a good wake-up call for people to see why architects may advocate for certain things in the project. I also was
hand raised. Sorry, Hussey. We have one hand raised if you want to. It's Ruby Rose.
Perfect. Please go ahead.
Ruby, if you want to turn your camera on, I can highlight you for everyone. If you can't, you can just talk.
Yes, no, I'm not going to do the camera today. Unfortunately, it's been a long day. So, but this was a really great presentation, and I'm just so grateful that you guys are sharing this content. I now work for a utility, but prior to that was a consultant for affordable housing developers. And, based off of funding requirements, they definitely had to push the edge with sustainability and addressing energy efficiency and healthy living spaces for those that they would be building for. And, I think one of the biggest issues as designers is being advocates for the communities that don't have voices. So I'm just so glad to see organizations like this that are fighting and advocating and being the voice for those that typically don't have a voice. But also just within the design space, not just as architects, but also overall, all industry designer players. So MEPs and anybody else who's working in the space, just it's a bit of hand-holding as a designer when you're leading teams and educating them on why you want to lead on certain measures and implement, I guess you can say, energy efficiency or decarbonization measures, because I think that's really what the topic is right now. But, I used to work out in Torrance and had the refinery. You could see it from the rooftop of the building that I had. And there was multiple times where there was incidents. And the first thing that would come to mind is just the people that were living around there. And as you drive around those areas, you can see that the communities that are specifically within the close proximity of those spaces are those that are going to be of the lower income levels and don't have the option to live outside of that. And so, even within the space of helping new construction, I think also helping existing goes a long ways as well. And getting involved when you're working with, when you're going to cities and you're proposing projects, educating city councils and planning commissions on the value and importance of implementing decarbonization measures, I think is really important. I'm a planning commissioner myself, and I would love to see more designers that are coming in with projects speak to the value of what they're proposing if they are incorporating decarbonization measures. So just wanted to share that on that end.
Fantastic. Thanks for these great points. I hope everybody would get involved. And would you mind sharing how they can get on your email list to get your newsletters or things that you send out? I think that would be good for all of us to have.
So we share the website there, for the people living in California, if people in this meeting living in California, you could be very helpful. In our Stand LA campaign, we have needed doctors to come and testify. We have needed nurses to come and testify. We have needed the unions to come and testify, because when we need expertise to say, you know, and we if we are able to phase out all these oil drilling sites, we're gonna need to redo those sites, and we need your ideas and your involvement. So there's a lot that you can do. And when we're pushing legislators, you know, we give you the talking points. All you have to do is submit a comment online, and that's very helpful. So don't undermine. Yeah.
I also put our website. They can't see our website and our emails because the slides aren't up anymore. So I put them in the chat. I put our website and our yours and my email. But was there another way you had to get on the mailing list?
If you write to Julia right there and say, put me on your mailing list, we'll make sure that we channel you to that, to our contact information. But don't forget that donating is something that everybody can do. This facility, these industries wanna get us out of the way. And you know, they can break you. We might be able to win in court, and then they appeal and appeal and appeal, and they keep delaying. And you know, we can't expect the judges to rule on our side. We can't expect the regulators. Right now, we're fighting to try to get legislation approved in California so that we can add 2 members to the Air Quality Management District that represent the environmental justice community. Because right now it's all industry people that, you know, they might as well be spokespeople for the refineries when it's time to vote. Like in the expansion of the Tesoro, we're losing everything with the regulators, even when their staff want to do the right thing. When it comes to the board to vote, you know, there might be 1 or 2 progressive that would vote our way. The rest are people that are totally pro-industry, and we're losing. And the same thing in court. That's why Julia mentioned, when we have people in the communities behind us, and we can get to the hearings with 50 or 100 people, and we can bring people to provide testimony, and one of you can say, as an architect, I want to tell you, you know, when about cutting benzene, because, you know, they people are getting cancer. And even when you're vegetarian, when you exercise, so where is the cancer coming from? You're sleeping on the pillow and on the bed that has benzene. That's why I'm not getting any new furniture.
I think I think we're about to be cut off for time. Yeah. But you can see why Alicia is a great one to have on our side. She's passionate and she never stops. And we need you to come along with us to help so we can win more of these battles.
Yeah, we really enjoyed listening to you, Alicia. Thank you so much for your passion and for all the great work you're doing. I guess, yes, our time is up. And thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully this was a good event for you. Thank you to all our presenters. We'll be in touch. Please, you know, count on us. We COTE stand by you, and will hopefully be a good partner and help out with any future initiatives you have. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see you in future events as well.